as we welcome for the first time Timothy Alberino to the program. Well, it's been a long time, and this is the first time we've on the program, so welcome to A View from the Bunker.
Thank you. I'm finally here in the bunker.
Well, it seems like every time you come here, we get busy doing other things, and we don't have time during your visit. But here, you're spending a couple of days here in the Ozarks, so we got a chance to finally sit you down in the studio.
Here we are.
Yeah. Boy, we got a lot of stuff to cover here because you guys have had a busy 2017, what with the conference in, I guess let's start with that. I mean, you guys had the conference in Branson that you and Steve, Gen 6 Productions, put together this year with just an amazing lineup. And we're going to let you know with the graphic here where you can get the DVD set, because the DVDs of the presentations, the video recordings of the presentations, is that's just an incredible collection.
It was a phenomenal conference, and we got such positive feedback from that conference. People were telling us it was the best conference they've ever been to. The atmosphere was epic, and all the presenters did an amazing job, and everything was synchronized. All of the presentations were synchronized, unintentionally synchronized. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoyed it, and I know that the audience enjoyed it, and it was powerful. In fact, and I'm speaking from my personal experience, it was surprisingly anointed. Mm-hmm. I knew it was going to be good because of the quality of the speakers. I didn't realize how anointed it was going to be.
I come from a liturgical background where the word anointed never came up on a Sunday morning. That was not part of our tradition in the evangelical Lutheran church. But I know what you're saying, because I was honored to kick off the conference, and as I came up there, in front of this theater, every seat filled, 3,000 people. It was like something from outside was kind of guiding where I was going with the whole thing. I didn't really know how I was going to conclude the talk, and it came together, I thought, better than I could have hoped. So, anointed is a good word for it, because I'm not giving myself a pat on the back for that. It was something that I hadn't expected or planned for that came together. We were out in the lobby during your talk, but I saw how emotional you got during your presentation. So, because that's the same way I got during my talk. You just get this feeling inside of you that is just, why am I even worthy to be here right now doing this?
The weight.
Yeah.
The weight of what we were saying, all of us together.
Right.
The weight of what we were presenting, the hour in which we were presenting it, mm-hmm. In terms of the time frame in which we now live. It all rested so heavily upon me when I was up there, and rested isn't even the right word. It was punching me in the gut, is what it felt like. Mm-hmm. Because I had obviously gone over my presentation many times, and this is the kind of stuff that I presented is within the themes that I often talk about, and never has, as I said, the weight, the ramification hit me in that way. And I attribute it to the fact that there's something very providential about that conference. Mm-hmm. And the audience was hungry, and there was a responsibility on our shoulders as speakers to give bread in due season. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we accomplished that, all of us together, because everything was so perfectly synchronized. Yeah, yeah. Well, to be part of a gathering, and like I said the other day when we were just talking, Sharon and I got started on this journey back in 2000, I don't know, 3, 4, we started writing, and we're writing fiction and trying to find a way to market it using podcasting, which is, why we're doing this now. That started back in 2005 as we got a publisher. Yeah, you're going to have to market your stuff. Okay, what can we do? Well, podcasting had just become a thing. And so we were very early in that game. But what led us to that point was listening to Steve Quayle on his internet broadcast every night. And one of his favorite guests, of course, is Tom Horn. The QCast.
Yeah,
no, I'm sorry, not the Q. The Q-Files.
The Q-Files?
He's doing the QCast now.
Right.
Which is a little video presentation. But back then it was the Q-Files.
And it was, on the, what was it? The radio network. I've still got old recordings somewhere on the hard drive here on one of my external drives somewhere. I've got old Steve Quayle radio broadcasts. But listening to Tom and Steve what got us inspired to start doing research and to write and to start talking about this. And that led us to interview other people like, Stan Dale, L.A. Marzulli, and Dr. Michael Heiser and others, Guy Malone, Joe Jordan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that led us down this path to, where, in the fall of 2017, I find myself on a conference stage, sharing the stage, and getting to moderate the discussion between you, Steve, and Tom, which was phenomenal too. Just an amazing journey that we've been led down. So let's talk about your journey. You're considerably younger than me. You're young enough to be, if I'd been a young dad, probably my son. So what is it that led you because it took me longer to find this road than it did you. So how did you get here so much quicker than me?
I dropped out of high school and moved to the Amazon jungle in a nutshell.
Kids, don't try this at home.
It's pretty much how it began for me. And there's a long story there, but I was quite dissatisfied as a young man, 17, 18, 19 years old, especially 17 and 18 years old. And I grew up in the church. I had a fantastic upbringing. My mom and dad were excellent parents. My mom died when I was 14, but they were excellent parents and very godly parents. And I grew up in a church environment. My dad was the pastor of a non-denominational church called New Testament Fellowship in the Cleveland, Ohio region, or in the Cleveland region of Ohio, I should say. And so I grew up in the church environment, and it was both beneficial and in some ways detrimental. Beneficial, obviously, because I had a wonderful upbringing and because I was always surrounded by mature believers, people who were in the faith, always in that environment of the scriptures and worship and that sort of thing. Very beneficial. Detrimental because, and this is the reason why I think a lot of preachers' kids, the PK kids, end up spiraling out of control and getting into all kinds of, they seem to be more extreme in their zeal for sin than your run-of-the-mill, non-believing, secular person. And I think it's because there's which wasn't me, by the way. That wasn't my course at all. And I'm not patting myself on the back. It just wasn't. And I have a twin brother. Neither of us were given over to that sort of thing. But many of our friends who were also preachers' kids did end up going down the typical path. And part of it is because there tends to be, in the American church at least, and again, I've gleaned much benefit from growing up in this environment, but there tends to be you lose the substance of the gospel very quickly. And there's a lot of superficial, there's a lot of Sunday school superficiality that after a while begins to erode a person's connection with what we might call the organic truth of scriptures, the organic presentation of the gospel as you find it in the scriptures. And the church routine becomes, as I said, superficial. And what happens, you actually become disconnected to a degree, and you get caught up in a culture of churchianity, as opposed to getting reinforced in the gospel and going deeper in the mysterious things of the gospel, which is what we are encouraged to do by Paul in the scriptures, is to get beyond the milk, to have that stuff established in our lives, and then continue to mature in the things of God and the knowledge of God. And I'm not saying that to put churches down by any means, but for me, it was a frustration. I hated youth-oriented stuff when I was growing up, because I didn't want youth-oriented stuff. I wanted the meat of biblical truth. I didn't want to be fed a cool youth version of the truth.
Yeah,
I just wanted the raw truth.
A lot of youth group material, a lot of youth group activities are, to be quite honest, just intended to occupy the kids with something, just to take up their time with something, so that they're out of the parents' way while the parents are doing what they want to do in the church setting.
Exactly, and to a degree when I was growing up, but in especially in a lot of churches now, youth-oriented programs, youth-oriented meetings are in some ways ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Because there's no reason why a child or a young person can't understand the truth of history, for example. And part of the reason is the truth of history is not hardly known, except for in these kind of circles, except for here with you guys, Skywatch and these kind of fringe, you might call fringe, Christian fringe circles, or at least is what people looking from the outside in might consider it. So, obviously the theme relating to the Genesis 6 affair and everything that's encompassed in that was foreign to me and to most people when I was growing up in church. But now that I look back on it, I make sure I have 4 sons. Now that I look back on it, I want my sons to have that as the context for history. Mm-hmm. Not just some extra biblical or some fanciful thing that's interesting that maybe happens to be in the Bible. No, it is the context for history. And obviously, even beyond that, Adam and Eve and so forth, obviously is the context for human history, the basis of human history beginning with Adam and Eve. But very quickly on, you get the Watchers, and you get the giants, and you get that whole affair that led to the destruction of the old world. That's history. It's essential to have the proper biblical worldview. To have everything in context, you have to lay the right foundation from the beginning. And I never had that foundation.
Well, most of us in the church haven't.
But I was wired for it. I was wired to have that foundation. I grew up reading the Chronicles of Narnia. I grew up engrossed in those kind of stories. Something inside of me was prepared to receive that information that I never received. And I'm not putting that on anybody because you can only teach what you know. And you're only responsible for what you know. And so I'm not blaming anybody. But the problem I will blame in a general sense, the policy of most seminaries is to take the Sethite view of Genesis 6, which absolutely destroys the narrative of true history. And so because they take that Sethite view in the seminaries, the pastors know no other view. They're unaware that there are other contingencies possible for Genesis 6. And slowly, I think some of the seminaries are at least acknowledging that there's another view. And so what that did, and what it does, is it disarms a young person who might otherwise excel in the knowledge of the truth, and all truth, not just the knowledge of what we call the gospel, but what is called the gospel in scriptures, but also the truth of history, which is, as I said, essential for us to have a proper worldview. And so that was missing. One of the elements that was missing for me, and I was hungry. I was very hungry, and I was disillusioned with a lot of things. I hated high school, hated it. Got kicked out of high school, dropped out of high school, and essentially moved to the Amazon jungle. And when I did that, this is a very long-winded answer. I apologize to your question. But when I did that, out on my own in a third world country, didn't speak the language, had to learn the language, didn't have any money, had to work for. Basically, I taught English for food. And I lived in the jungle for periods of time, in the jungle, deep in the jungle, and I loved it. The lumberjacks, the hunters, and I learned a lot. It wasn't Sunday school in the jungle.
No, I can imagine not. It's one of those things where failure's not an option, so you're going to have to either suck it up, Buttercup, or you wind up back home in Cleveland, and then and then what? Back in the old routine?
Exactly. Yeah. So, in your faith, my faith in God was always very strong since I was a boy. And I attribute that primarily to the great upbringing I had. But when I went into the jungle and I severed myself from the world I knew and thrust myself into the unknown, I was forced to deal with everything that I had absorbed internally, all of my beliefs, everything. And rather than doing what so many people who have a very shallow foundation do and just sort of, oh, none of this is worthwhile, I'm going to go pursue other things in life, which happens to a lot of atheistic people. They walk away bitter. Mm-hmm. After maybe having been a Christian or growing up a Christian, they walk away bitter thinking, what is this nonsense that I've been carrying around? Rather than that happening with me, my faith was cemented even deeper. I mean, and I experienced things that just absolutely, for the first time in my life, I can say, for the first time in my life, although I had been a believer all my life, for the first time in my life, I really, really, really began to understand the gospel. And it happened literally in the middle of the jungle.
It's almost a tale of like an Old Testament prophet type.
That's only the beginning of the story. Which I always allude to this mysterious thing because I can't get around it without at least alluding to it. There is a particular thing that happened to me in the jungle that was very life changing, and I'm not trying to tease people with this, but anyways, something occurred in my life that was pivotal, and it really launched me forward for the rest of my life.
Supernatural experience?
Yes. I had never, ever, ever taken any kind of drugs in my life. And again, I'm not patting myself on the back. If anything, I'm patting my parents on the back. Mm-hmm. I was too afraid of my dad to have taken. And it wasn't that my dad never beat me or anything. I mean, I've gotten some hard whippings with the belt, but justly deserved. So, but I had a healthy, godly fear of my father, to where I wouldn't dream of doing something like taking drugs or going and getting drunk or sleeping around or something like that. For one, I never really wanted to, but even if I did, it was terrifying to think what would happen if I did.
I know. Well, the funny thing is, my dad is about 5'7", and I'm about 5'11" and a half. So I'm, 4.5, 5 inches taller than my dad. But in my mind's eye, I still am looking up to him.